Hi, this is Whitney from Weddings Done Well, and today we are going to be talking all about your wedding budget. Now, because that's such a big topic, I'm actually going to be breaking it up into two videos. So today's video, I'm going to just kind of walk you through it. All the different things that go into a budget, how to categorize them, what falls within each category, how to decide what you need and what you don't need, how to prioritize if you need to prioritize in order to stay within your desired budget. And then in another video, we're going to actually be going through a budget spreadsheet. So I'm actually going to walk you through a spreadsheet and show you how to create it, where to plug in the different figures, how to decide what your desired budget should be versus what your actual budget should be, and then how to keep up with that accounting. So let's get started. We are working within the Weddings Done Well planning checklist. So if you don't have them already, head over to weddingsdonewell.com, go to the tools page, and there you will see all the different planning checklists and different printouts and questionnaires that you need. They're all free downloads. So head over there now and download the planning checklist for 18 months plus. And today's video, we're actually working with item number 6, which is creating your wedding budget. So on the tools page of the website, you will find this. It is called the Comprehensive Budget Breakdown, and it's just a list of everything that is going to be a part of your wedding budget. Okay, so go ahead and have these in front of you, and then let's get started. Let's talk about what goes into the reception category. And you're just gonna have to forgive me because I'm gonna be referencing this as I go because there are just too many things on here for me to memorize them for you. But number one, item one, I should say, within the 48% is your site fee. Okay, so what that means is that whatever venue you choose for your reception, it's going to be the fee that you pay for that venue. There's a good chance that the same venue is going to be used for your ceremony, cocktail hour, and reception, but not necessarily. You might get married, let's say at a church or a temple, and then head over somewhere else for your reception. So that's why we break that up separately. Also, there might not be an itemized site fee because if you look over the total contract that you have with your venue, they might just kind of build the site fee into one big total price. That's fine too. But if there is an itemized site fee, you're going to plug it in there. Next is going to be catering. That is going to be a part of your reception no matter what. Again, if your venue includes catering, that might just be part of the overall contract price. Or if you bring in your own caterer, then obviously that will be a separate price. Under catering are going to be your hors d'oeuvres or appetizers, entrees, desserts, the servers, vendor meals, and then gratuity. The next item is your bar, and that's going to include everything from the liquor to the garnishes and mixers, and then any non-alcoholic beverages like your water, your lemonade, your iced tea, your sodas. It's also going to include champagne for your toast, or champagne like if you're going to be serving champagne all night, and then the ice. A lot of the time, I know people are normally surprised that you actually pay for ice, but if you're bringing in a bartending company, yes, they will charge you for ice. And then if that ice gets delivered outside the bartending company, so let's say you're using one company for your bartending staff, but they don't include ice, and so that's a delivery service, then there's also a delivery fee for it. And then the bar staff itself, and then any gratuities that go to the bar staff. The next item is your wedding cake. And within that category is the cake itself, your cake stand, so whatever the cake is going to stand on. Sometimes that can be rented, by the way. So you should ask the bakery where you get your wedding cake whether they have stands for you to choose from. The groom's cake, if you are doing a groom's cake, you don't have to. I would even say that most weddings don't have a groom's cake. Maybe like 30% of them in my experience will. And what that is just a special cake for the groom. So you always have your formal traditional wedding cake. And then if you want to do something kind of fun, kind of silly, something that maybe represents the groom's personality or what he does for a living or hobbies or interests of his, then you would do that as a groom's cake. So let's say the groom is really into football, maybe do a cake with like a football field or in the shape of a football, or maybe he's into a specific NFL team, maybe do a cake in the logo of the NFL team in the team colors. If he's really into Cars, I had a couple ones who had a little groom's cake made of the bride and groom in this like convertible Mustang. Once we had a groom who was a brain surgeon. So the bride actually had a groom's cake made that looked like a brain. It was crazy, but it was actually really fun. So figure out what the groom is into. And I will also mention that groom's cake are normally a surprise. So if you are going to do something like that, I wouldn't tell him and let that be something that he comes to find on the wedding day. And then cake decor, so anything that you're going to be using to decorate the cake. Cake topper, so whatever you're going to put on top of your cake. Again, you don't have to. Sometimes cakes are designed to not need a topper, like they just have enough embellishment going on their own that there's really nothing else that you need to add. And then the delivery. So if the cake is being ordered from an outside bakery, then there's often a delivery charge. The next item under reception has to do with any displays you'd like to set up at your wedding. And these are not requirements. You definitely don't have to have these things, but oftentimes we see couples do these, so that's why I've included them. So it would be anything from like a coffee station, a candy display, any type of dessert display, maybe a popcorn display. We've seen people do caramel corn or a chocolate display. I've always recommended that couples do some kind of really cool chocolate display where it's like chocolate truffles and maybe it's paired with different like port wines or specific red wines. Maybe you could do even like a flight and everyone can walk up to a station and get a little chocolate truffle and then a glass of wine or a little flight of like those cute little like port glasses, like 3 of them or 3 little wine glasses, and they do a little flight that's specifically paired with that chocolate. Just an idea, throwing it out there. But either way, if you want to do some type of a station, then the cost of that would go within this reception category. The next item has to do with rentals and additional decor. If you are choosing a venue that includes all the rentals, so that would be tables, chairs, table linens, just anything that you need for the bar, all the barware, glassware, flatware, china. If all that's included in your venue and you're happy with the options, then terrific. You can just kind of skip this line. But if it's not included or there's certain things that you would like to upgrade or just something that you're not loving what the venue provides for you, so you'd like to bring something in from the outside, then this would go under that rentals category. Additionally, if you'd like to set up like a special vignette during your cocktail hour or reception with like, let's say, a love seat and 2 chairs and a coffee table, or if you, let's say, are having a theme wedding and maybe it's Great Gatsby, and so you want to bring in things that look more vintage, like they're from the 20s. Maybe you want to bring in some vintage rentals. There are a lot of different rental options. We'll shoot a video all about rentals. But if you are going to be bringing those in, then this falls within the reception category. The next item has to do with either specialty lighting or safety lighting. So if you want to light up your wedding in a certain way. So let's say you want to make the room purple, or you want to do certain walls in a certain color and maybe different walls in another color. If you want to bring in a specialist to do lighting for you, then that would come under the specialty lighting line. And then also if there's safety lighting. So sometimes we've coordinated weddings at venues where at nighttime lighting is not already provided, but it's something that you need to bring in to ensure that your guests are able to see their way around. Maybe you need to light a path from the reception area to the restroom, from the restroom to the parking area, that sort of thing. So all those different types of lighting is what we're talking about here. And then finally, there's the other. And other is just anything you want to throw in there. So if you want to bring in, let's say, a special entertainer, you want to have a magician circulate at cocktail hour, or you want to have certain ethnic dancers come during your reception, that type of thing. And then also, let's say you're doing something late at night. Maybe the reception already provides catering, and so you're going to feed your guests their normal meals. You know, they're having like a normal traditional dinner, but later at night, for everybody that wants to stay and party, maybe like at 11:30 midnight, an In-N-Out truck comes, or an ice cream truck comes, or it doesn't even have to be a truck. There are companies that come and set up. So let's say you want to do an ice cream station, ice cream sandwich station, a pretzel station, a cotton candy station, and you want them to set up late at night, then this is kind of considered like the other category. Okay, next up we have 13 to 15% of your total budget, and that would go toward photography and videography. So I'm gonna make another video and you should check it out because it's going to talk all about the benefits to photography and videography and how to think through whether you want one or both. It usually goes without saying that couples do a photographer, but oftentimes they elect to forego the videographer. And that's a personal decision, and we'll talk through whether or not that's a good one for you. So that'll be in another video. But for now, let's just assume that you're gonna have both. You're gonna break that into about 13 to 15% of your total budget. So within photography, it's gonna include any consultations, negatives if you're using film photography. There are several photographers that are still shooting in film photography. Any editing, extra copies of things, a second shooter, maybe even a third shooter, which what that means is it's a second photographer and or a third photographer there on your wedding day in addition to that primary photographer. Sometimes people use husband and wife teams, so you actually have two shooters. You have an online photo gallery typically where you can go and see your photos when they first come out. And then if you decide to add on the photo album, then the cost goes under photography. The next item is the engagement session, and I will say that typically your engagement session is a part of the package price with your photographer. The reason that I separated it is because sometimes people will shoot their engagement session with a different photographer. Let's say that you and your soon-to-be husband or wife are originally from San Francisco or Taiwan or, wherever, and you want to go there to shoot your engagement photo, so you want to hire a photographer that lives there. That totally makes sense, and so that's why this is separated. But if at all possible, I do recommend you using your photographer, your wedding day photographer, to shoot your engagement session with. And the reason for that is because you really want to spend time with this person and get comfortable in front of their camera before your wedding day. So if you spend a whole session with them doing your engagement photos, then by the time your wedding day photo comes along, or wedding day photo session comes along, you're like an old hand. You're like, I got this, I'm comfortable, I know how this goes, I know how they'd like us to pose, I know how long to stand. I just feel this really good chemistry with this photographer that we've already established. And so it's going to make your wedding day that much more comfortable and smooth. So if you can, try and do the engagement photos with the same person. Finally is the videography. So usually the videographer is a separate company, although not always. There are definitely some companies that offer photography and videography services as one package. But if the videography is separate, it's going to include any consultations, any editing, titles, extra discs, a second shooter, again, maybe even a third shooter, and then an online video gallery, which is the place that you'll be able to go to view your video just as soon as it's ready. So our next item is flowers, and that's going to account for 6 to 10% of your budget, just depending on what your budget is and how important flowers are to you. So you'll be able to decide on a number within that 6 to 10% range. Now I'll let you look this over and see, because it's very lengthy what's included under your flowers, but I just want to point out that you definitely don't want to forget any grandparents, any step parents. It's up to you on whether you'd like to have like a special corsage or wristlet for, let's say your parents are divorced and your father has a girlfriend. They're not married, so she's not your stepmother, but depending on the seriousness of the relationship and how long they've been together, and again, there's so many different factors. But if you'd like to have her feel included and she's going to be taking photos with the family and that sort of thing, then you might think about flowers for her. Same goes for potential boyfriends. And then flowers for everything, from the first thing that guests come to, which would be like your welcome table and your guest book table, to every flower as part of your ceremony. Cocktail hour flowers. So if you do special cocktail tables, then you'll probably want special arrangements for those cocktail tables. And then here's a trick. If the budget is, actually I was gonna say if the budget's limited, but even if it's not limited, you might wanna repurpose flowers just because they're beautiful, and why not, right? So my suggestion is take your ceremony and your cocktail hour flowers and move them to the reception. If you even put them in a different vessel, like a vase or some type of a box or a bird cage or whatever you're using to house your flowers, if you take your flowers from your ceremony and cocktail hour and put them into a different vessel, then your guests would see them at the reception and not even realize that it's the same flowers. So this is a really helpful trick to maximize your budget and repurpose flowers, because otherwise they just sit there and, that's sad. Make sure you remember to include any delivery fees and any pickup fees. You also should find out as you interview potential florists whether they will rent pieces out to you. So let's say you don't want to buy like 50 vases because what are you going to do with them after your wedding? Oftentimes florists will just charge you a rental fee. Now that can kind of be offset by an additional charge for them to pick them up. So let's say you rent vases from the florist and you save money per vase, but at the end of the night they have to come back for them to pick them up because the vases still belong to the florist. Then by the time you pay that fee, it might not make as much sense. But find out, because with the rental fee plus the pickup fee, you still might save money as opposed to buying all those vases. And then in addition to that, you also want to find out from your venue whether there are things that your florist is going to be responsible for. So let's say at your ceremony, the flower girl drops flower petals. Are you responsible for picking up those petals, or would the venue do it? Because if you're responsible for things like that, then you're probably going to need to make sure that your florist stays behind to pick up those petals, or maybe you set up some beautiful ceremony arch or a chuppah or something like that, and it needs to be broken down right after your ceremony. Again, you might need to ask your florist to stay behind to take care of that for you. If that's the case, then there's probably a fee for them to do that, and you want to build that fee into this cost here. Our next item is again 6 to 10% of your budget, and that is for attire and beauty. So within that are going to be the bride's gown and then everything having to do with the gown. So like if she's going to change into a second gown or like some type of an exit outfit, that would be included, because then it wouldn't just be one gown, but it would be like 2 or even maybe 3 gowns. Alterations, so any alterations that need to be done on those gowns. Bridal accessories, veil, hairpiece, a second veil, any jewelry, things that the bride is going to use to accessorize her look. That also includes shoes and undergarments. And then bridal beauty and preparation, so her makeup, and then the cost of any trials that she has beforehand to test the makeup. Eyebrow waxing, a mani-pedi, a hair, and then again an additional fee if you come in advance to do a hair trial. All of those go under that category. And then of course our groom, anything having to do with his attire, whether he's going to wear a tux or a suit or something else. If he's renting or if he's purchasing, then the price is going to come there. Shoes, socks, a tie, anything that he's going to change into at the conclusion of the evening, and then any alterations that would need to be performed on whatever the groom wears. All of this comes into the attire and beauty category. Our next category is again a range. It's 5 to 10% of your total budget, and that's going to go toward wedding coordination. Now, again, the reason that it's a range is because there are there are a lot of different options that you have for coordination. You could just hire a basic day of coordinator. That's just a person, and really the extent of their service to you is just on the wedding day itself to ensure that the day goes smoothly. Or you could hire a full service coordinator that is with you from the start of your planning process all the way through your wedding day and works with you multiple hours a week and attends meetings with you and updates your budget and does everything that a full service wedding coordinator would do. So because that service can vary so much, the price would also vary so much. And that's why we dedicate 5 to 10% of your budget. The next item also has a lot of variation, and so that's why, again, it's a 5 to 10% range, and that is toward music. And the reason that I say that is because if you use a DJ for your ceremony, cocktail hour, and reception, you are going to pay significantly less than you would if, let's say, you brought in a 16-piece orchestra. So really, because the options are plenty, we're gonna just have to say 5 to 10% of your budget. And so you're gonna think about your ceremony music, cocktail hour music, and reception. And in the notes, I also mentioned that you have different options for your ceremony musician, be it a trio, a string quartet, let's say a guitarist, a violinist, a pianist, a harpist. And here's a little tip. If you are going to bring in a special instrumentalist for your ceremony, it would probably behoove you to also have that person play for your cocktail hour. And the reason that I say that is because they usually, like 99.9% of the time, have a minimum. And the minimum is usually like 2 to 3 hours. So they probably charge an hourly rate, but they tell you that that's with a 2 or 3 hour minimum. And that's because they don't want to drive out to your venue and perform for, let's say, like a half hour. It's just financially doesn't make sense for them. So they need to have a minimum guaranteed. So that means that if you only use them for your ceremony, you're still going to pay the minimum. So let's say your ceremony is like, let's say they play for a half hour as guests arrive and then your entire wedding ceremony is 20 minutes, then you've only used this person for 50 minutes, but you might be paying them a 3 hour minimum, right? So if you're going to pay someone for 3 hours, use them for that amount of time, which means have them stay on for cocktail hour and just take advantage of the money that you're spending. And then for the reception, then, do what you would like to do for your reception. Like if you're bringing in a harpist for your ceremony and cocktail hour, I wouldn't necessarily have a harpist be your sole entertainment for the entire reception, but you could theoretically even have the harpist play during dinner. So if, let's say, the first thing that you're going to do at your reception is eat, maybe even have the harpist stay on. If you're still within that 3 hours, have the harpist stay on and play for dinner, and then have like a band or a DJ take over from there. Here's one other cost saving tip. If you are using a band, like let's say you have this awesome rock and roll band and there are 16 pieces and they're playing for your reception, you should find out if a few of the instrumentalists could play for your ceremony and cocktail hour. So let's say as part of the band, there's like a guitarist and a pianist, or a little jazz trio that could be pulled from the larger band. Find out if they could do that, because if they can, then you'd be using the services of one company as opposed to two. The next item on your budget is your ceremony, and you're probably going to dedicate about 5% of your budget toward that. Now, if you are going to have your wedding ceremony at a venue that is different than your reception, then there's probably going to be a separate site fee for your ceremony, in which case this 5% would go toward that site fee. If it's not, then you can probably build that cost into the total contract price of your venue. In addition to the site fee, you're going to be paying for your officiant. So if that's like a flat fee, let's say that you hire an officiant who comes and they charge a flat rate, so be it. Otherwise, oftentimes I'll see, like if it's a church pastor or a rabbi, they will be paid in the form of a donation to the church or the temple. So find that out. And then in addition to that, it would be little things like your flower girl basket and your ring bearer pillow and any additional decor you'll have at your ceremony, like your guest book and whatever you're going to be using to collect cards from guests, a pen, any decor, any like mini water bottles that you're going to be passing out, or umbrellas that you'll be distributing to guests if you're getting married outside on a hot day. Those types of things are all going to come out of that 5% ceremony fee. So sticking with our 5% trend, our stationery is going to account for another 5% of your total budget. And within stationery, I actually like to break that up into two parts because I tend to see that they are like 50-50 in terms of price. So the first 50% is usually all toward your formal invitations. Not always, because some people are having a more casual wedding and they don't want to spend a lot on their invites. That's totally fair. But typically you see people spend a good amount of money on their formal invitation. So because a wedding invitation is typically printed on like a nice cardstock and you use a really nice type of printing, you oftentimes bring in a calligrapher to do the envelopes, the cost of the envelope itself, stamping, any type of inserts that you put in there. So like letting guests know where hotel accommodations are available, or maybe a map to the venue. All of those things are a part of your traditional formal wedding invitation. And those are usually pretty significant cost here. So if you're taking 5% and dedicating it toward your overall stationery budget, half of that, or like 2.5%, will probably go to your formal invites. And then the other half, or the other 2.5%, would go toward everything else. So that would be things like any escort cards, like the little cards you'll put at the table to let guests know where they're seated, table numbers or table names, which are the big sign in the center of the table to let guests know which table that is. If you're going to be pre-ordering thank you notes, if you're going to have special cocktail hour napkins made like with your monogram or your names on it and your wedding date, that will all fall in kind of the other stationery category. Also, if you're gonna have any signs made, so let's say instead of escort cards, you're gonna have a big mirror with all your guests' name on it, or a really beautiful piece of art like a canvas with everybody's names on them. Or let's say you're doing signage on the bar, you're putting signage, like let's say you're having a buffet and you're gonna have signs made to let guests know what's on the buffet. All of that would also be considered kind of the other category for stationery. So moving right along, we're going to come down to the transportation, and that is going to account for 3% of your total budget. Now within transportation would be things like parking. So guest parking, let's say you need to rent a parking lot for your guests to use, or let's say that your venue offers parking, but they charge a fee for either self-parking or maybe they have valet parking. I've also seen venues where they have a lot, but they require that you use a valet company to manage the lot. And so you have to pay for an outside valet company to come in. So anything having to do with parking would be part of this 3%. And then in addition to that, if you're going to be providing any type of transportation. So let's say you're renting a limo or like a classic car or a shuttle bus or a school bus, or you're doing something fun either to get the bride or the groom or the bride and the wedding party, or you can kind of break that up depending on what fits for your wedding day. But if you're going to be transporting people from, let's say, the place that they're getting ready to the ceremony site, or the ceremony site to the reception site, any of those transportation details would also come into this 3%. So finally, we're at 3% again for favors and gifts. So favors would be things like wedding favors. If you're going to put something special on the table, let's say you're going to give your guests a little picture frame or some special type of candy or a special dessert, a little miniature pie. Those types of things are going to be wedding favors, and so they come into this 3%. And then also gifts. So let's say you're going to be gifting let's say that the bride and groom are covering the cost of the wedding, and so they also want to give a gift to their parents or a gift to their wedding parties, then the cost would also come out of that 3%. Now, I preface that by saying that the bride and groom hosting in that case would be giving these gifts, because that would make sense. But let's say that the parents are hosting, and so they're going to be giving the bride and groom the money. It would be a little bit weird for the bride and groom to then take their money and buy them a gift with it. So in that case, you might take the gift money out of the budget so that the bride and groom can gift their parents like via their own money. Does that make sense? And then the last thing here is your photo booth. And the reason I include the photo booth is because oftentimes the couple will gift their guests their photo strip. So like if they're going into a video booth or a photo booth or whatever the case may be, and they take something that they get to then take home with them, that actually would qualify as a favor. And so then the cost of the photo booth can actually come out of this 3% area. So at this point, I'll mention that there are a few items that are not included here on this budget breakdown, and I want to bring those up. So one of them would have to do with wedding related events. So things like your engagement party, your bachelorette party, bridal shower, rehearsal dinner, events like that. And the reason that I often take those out of this main budget, or that couples tell me that they want to do it that way, is because those are often hosted by someone else. So the person or the people hosting the wedding is often a different person or people than, let's say your bachelorette party, which is often hosted by your maid of honor and bridesmaids, for example. So because those usually are hosted by different people, they often have separate budgets. Wedding bands, that's another one. Oftentimes brides and grooms want to buy each other their wedding bands. And I don't mean like the musical entertainment. I mean like jewelry, like wedding bands. So let's say their families are helping to host the wedding, but it's really special that and important to them that they gift each other with their wedding bands. They don't want that to come out of the total budget, so they'll often put those outside the budget. If that's not the case for you, if that doesn't apply here, then go ahead and put it in the budget. That's totally fine. I mean, I want this to be applicable to you and your specific wedding. So let's say that you two, the bride and groom, are hosting the wedding yourselves, and so obviously the wedding band should therefore be a part of the budget. So go ahead and put that in there. The last thing that I often don't include here in the budget are accommodations. So things like a hotel or an Airbnb that the bride and or groom will be staying at the night before and then the night of. And the reason that I often don't put the accommodations here is because A lot of the times the venue includes accommodations, especially if you're getting married at a hotel. So a lot of that time that's already included in the package price. Sometimes brides and grooms are actually beginning their honeymoon after the wedding. And so they want to put the overnight accommodations for the wedding night as part of their honeymoon budget. And then a lot of the times couples will actually use like credit card reward points or Expedia points or things like that. And they use those toward their accommodations along with their honeymoon. So because there are all those different factors, a lot of the time I don't include it here in this budget. But again, in your case, if it should be included in your budget, go ahead and put that in there. I hope this has been really helpful to you and has given you a lot to think about. There is a lot to think about, right? But I am here for you. So if you have any questions or if you stumble into anything all along the way, I am your coordinator. I am your resource. So please feel free to use me. Tell me how I can help and I'll be more than happy to. If you have a specific question for me, go ahead and put it in the comments below. I promise I will read the comments and shoot a video just like this to answer it for you. So comment below, don't forget. And also while you're at it, make sure that you're liking this video and subscribing to the channel, Weddings Done Well, so that I can continue to help you coordinate your big day from start to finish. Happy planning.